Aloha and welcome to Island Connections. I'm Ibrahim Aoude, Education through Civic Engagement. We have two guests to discuss this important topic for education with us. Lillie Makaila, thank you for joining us. And Ulla Hasager. Lillie is a graduate student in urban and regional planning at UHM. And Ulla Hasager is Associate Specialist for Civic Engagement at Ethnic Studies, College of Social Sciences, UHM. Thank you for coming over. Okay. So I would like to start with you, Lillie, just to tell us something about you in terms of your education and even in high school and how you grew up in terms of schools and so forth, and then when you came to UH, and what happened in terms of service learning and civic engagement, and where are you now?
Well, I was very lucky to start at Kamehameha Schools, Kapalama campus, and I graduated in 2005. And as soon as I graduated, I started at the University of Hawai'i, Mānoa. So I went into Hawaiian language and Hawaiian studies as my major. But got very distracted with ethnic studies and with Dr. Hasager. So that was definitely a good experience for me, and one of my first experiences at a college level with civic engagement. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Later on, I'm going to ask you about some of the projects and those kinds of activities that you have done and you're still doing at urban planning. Ulla, tell us something about you also and about your relationship to civic engagement, ethnic studies, and all of that.
I'm an anthropologist by training. I'm from Denmark, and my degree is from there. It has been natural for me always to integrate community work with my research and teaching. And which was strengthened considerably when I was mentored by Marion Kelly, professor of ethnic studies. The way I read ethnic studies, it was actually started with the community, and it colors what many of the professors at the department are doing. So it's a natural link.
Yeah.
There are also good methodological, pedagogical, and human reasons for civic engagement, which I can go into more later.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, something you mentioned that is important, like in terms of the establishment of ethnic studies, it was in relationship to the community. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here as a unit on campus in the College of Social Sciences. So we always had that kind of connection to the community, even when activism and social movements were at an ebb, we still had our relationships with the community, etc. So that's why, like, as you know, when it became important to have service learning at the beginning in terms of U.S. education and so on, that came to Hawaii. The dean of the College of Social Sciences asked ethnic studies to spearhead the effort and those activities for the college first, and then we moved from there. So, Lillie, I would like to ask you about, give us some kind of idea about like what were you doing, say, in Kamehameha, in terms of like ethnic studies or civic engagement projects. Were there those kinds of projects? And if so, what were they? If not, how did that change your understanding of learning, etc., when you came to UH Mānoa?
I think for me, when I was in high school, a lot of my studies was really framed from Hawaiian language and Hawaiian culture. And we were very fortunate to take a lot of, excursions into the community. And I think my senior year, I got to take a trip to Maui. And it was, language centric, but very much about learning in the outdoors, outside of a classroom setting with teachers that are not just your average teachers that teach you about a lot more than just content, and you get to experience, learning from doing. And so that, I think, was my first taste of it in high school.
Yeah, great. And Ulla, how did you get into civic engagement, service learning, like at ethnic studies? Well, when was the first time in an official capacity? Official meaning like, courses that offered service learning in the beginning, and then you might want to like distinguish or differentiate between service learning and civic engagement. What's the relationship? What are the differences?
Civic engagement is much broader than service learning, and I'll read you the official definition shortly. But I was first introduced to doing service learning when Marian Kelly, that I mentioned earlier, emeritus, emerita professor eventually at ethnic studies, recently passed away, and Bob Franco, who is an anthropologist at Kapiolani Community College and now the director of Office for Institutional Effectiveness, and one of the big grant writers in this area in Hawaii, if not the biggest grant writer. They had devised a project that was called 2+4. And the idea was to use service learning as a vehicle for supporting students going from KCC to UH Mānoa and cooperate around projects. And with Nelda Quincell, an ethnobotany teacher, and Carl Hefner, another anthropologist from Kapiolani, they devised a program that at that time was called Adopt an Ahupua.
Which was Marian Kelly's kind of co-sponsorship or sponsorship?
Yeah, it was very much based on her thinking. That program was developed and described, and then Marian decided that she needed to research something else, so she put it in my lab. And that was in 1997, and since then I've been doing service learning. And that 2+4 grant that we actually got at that time has continued in various forms until this year it's ending. We have continuously gotten them renewed through the Campus Compact and with the Hawaii Pacific Island Campus Compact.
Yeah, Lillie, could you like describe one of the activities that you have worked on, like with Ulla through an ethnic studies course, and then how did you react to it, and what was it? How significant it was to your education, to grasping that material? I don't know, which course did you take?
I took a lot.
Yeah. You took land tenure and Hawaii and the
did.
Pacific. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the land tenure course was the first course that I took with Ulla. And I think one of our first excursions was to the sacred site at Ulupo, Heiau. We went to a lot of different places. We went to Halava, we went to Makua Valley. I think for me, it was really interesting it was, I think, my first experience in college where we had learned about something so much from a research point of view, and then actually been able to go out into, the community and explore it, and have, knowledgeable experts that we were able to talk to for more than just an hour or so. I mean, we had quite a bit of time. And so it kind of changed the whole dynamic of learning about it. You don't have this short, classroom period only where you can discuss something. You can, walk around and see it and feel it and be in a group of people talking about it.
Very good. Before I go to you, Ulla, I want to play a segment from an interview I did with Willie Kawai. He would talk more about it, and then we can discuss what he said, and because he was working with you. Okay, so we go to that, and then we go from there.
One of the first times that I was introduced to service learning was through my experiences at Halau Kumana, which is a public charter school just a couple valleys over from Mānoa in the valley of Mauna Laha. And that was really one of the first times that I was able to kind of experience not only what service learning was, but what project-based learning was, or what culture-based learning was as well too. Those things I found to be very revolutionary compared to the education that I received in the standard box, in a standard classroom with a teacher in front of you. So it was really my experiences at Halau Kumana that introduced me to, I guess, this concept of service learning, this concept of project-based learning, culture-based learning, and also the importance of civic engagement.
Yeah, so he talked about service learning, civic engagement, and so forth. So could you say more about when it was service learning, but we didn't have any real help except like the person who's doing it, that's it, right? And we didn't have like graduate students helping out and all that. And how it developed to a point where there is, more of a specialization in that and more support.
It started out with being pretty class specific. When Marian and I first developed Adoptana Ahupua, now Malama Ina Ahupua, it was focused on the land tenure class that Lillie was just talking about. Mm-hmm. And it was geared towards that class, and at the other end towards ethnobotany classes at UH and KCC. Mm-hmm. So that was the primary focus. And many projects or programs developed like that from teachers' initiatives, their desire to involve the community in the learning and the teaching. And then it takes different forms. Mm-hmm. As we got the means and energy, mm-hmm. not necessarily paid energy mm-hmm. to do it, we actually expanded the Malama Ina Ahupua project into a program. Mm-hmm. And we now offer it for teachers and students from many different disciplines and mm-hmm. different institutions of higher education. Mm-hmm. We have been supported through the UH Mānoa Service Learning Office and Campus Compact grants from Learn and Serve America. That's now extinct. Mm-hmm. But I would say the primary support for making it running and becoming a program comes from the teachers involved and the department and the College of Social Sciences that have been very supportive mm-hmm. over the last 12 years or so.
Because I remember like when I taught Hawaii and the Pacific, and economic change, I would send students to you, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. Who would do some kind of activity, right. Either the lo'i, the hopoa'a, something in the fish pond, for mm-hmm. instance. So you had like, by the way, did you go to the fish pond activities?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Tell us something. I mean, what happens there? Like you go, what do you do?
Well, this is a good example of leadership development, I think.
Well, I think the fish pond that we went to was Waikalua Fish Pond in Kaneohe. And they were still very much in the process of mangrove removal.
Mm-hmm. That's what I remember.
So we worked pretty hard. Yeah. We definitely got very dirty. Uh-huh. But that one, lots of learning while doing. And but it was fun. It was always fun. When you have a big group of people, sometimes it's not always about the content of what you're learning, but being in a big group and accomplishing, being able to kind of look back at all the space that we cleared.
Yeah. So
or sometimes not that much space.
Yeah, because they keep coming up. Yeah. But how did that impact your learning? I mean, if you give me a specific example, you mentioned like you go to the fish pond, for instance, and then what happens aside from mangrove removal? How did that relate to the content of the class? Like 340 land tenure, was it? Yeah.
Well, we had learned quite a bit about fish ponds historically. So you spend a lot of time learning about things that were thriving several hundred years ago. And, history research kind of takes you up to a point, and then actually going to the fish pond, you learn about a whole new set of issues that they're dealing with. And you know, the new political issues that they're dealing with, the community organizing issues that they have to deal with. And so it kind of, you get this historical foundation kind of more in the classroom setting, and then definitely going out and visiting kind of opens your eyes to, you know, history didn't end. It's still kind of going along.
Continues.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, Ulla, could you say something more about your own experiences as regards the students? What kind of, you know, development you saw in them, like, say, in the early period first, and then was there change since there was more resources and support put into it, you know, so far as students were concerned?
Yeah, we know that it's one of the best practices of engaged learning. The AAC&U has several surveys and research examples proving that. And what I've seen in students that have been engaged in service learning or other forms of civic engagement is that they have developed leadership skills. They have improved their grades. We know that students involved in service learning generally have a higher GPA than other students. We cannot say it's because of service learning, but that is a fact. We know
there's
that.
a correlation.
There is a correlation. We know the retention is much higher because students feel related. They feel that they connect with the teacher or the service learning coordinator, who it may be. Students that are not performing well in this standard educational setting that has developed from Western society, I think, with a teacher instructing students, are very often excelling once they get into hands-on learning. They build better relationship with each other, and very often get a foot in the door for in a future career, get to try out a career choice.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, go ahead. You want
Yeah,
to
well,
say
there are many pedagogic advantages of civic engagement, aside
Right.
from the moral and political ones. that
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can go into.
But
But-
did you want to add something to that?
Well, I think definitely, of course, I agree with everything that was said, but I think it also gives you an opportunity to experience life outside of school, and in still, you know, a controlled learning environment, but you're able to kind of connect with the world around you and make linkages between, you know, what's happening in society and community with things that you're learning and reading about and researching.
Great. What I want to do now, go to Willie. I have another segment because he was talking about different projects. And then I want to ask you, you already said like the fish pond, you went to the fish pond, and I'm sure to the Lillie or to the Hawai'iʻs. But we'll do that with Willie talking about the projects, and then I'll ask you if you, what else have you done? Yeah.
There's basically 3 projects within the high school grade level that the students would rotate throughout. The 9th and 10th grade years when I was there was dedicated to the fish pond. So every Tuesday, Thursday, we would take a van out to Heia Fish Pond here on the island of Oahu. And that's where students would learn marine biology. That's where students would learn about the traditional aspects of the local i'a. That's where students would get to engage with different members of the community that are interested in revitalizing fish ponds. And that was just one project that Halau Kumana would offer. The other projects included the lo'i. Right now, Halau Kumana is looking to bring back to life a number of lo'i in the back of Mānoa Valley. And it's there where the standards-based curriculum, environmental sciences, botany, those types of standards are kind of integrated in this culture-based, project-based learning.
Yeah, so that's one of the things he was talking about, because his experience was with Halau Kumana, and then that's why it was a natural thing for him to be working with ethnic studies as a grad student on this civic engagement service learning. Did you have a chance to go to like a canoe, like Kanehunamoku, for instance? Did you do that? You didn't, yeah. So, but some of our students had that experience, like in 101 or something.
It's a recent development now.
Yeah, that's why, because, you know, she's now a grad student, you know. Yeah, but I was, you know, like curious to see if you had already. So there's always development in the civic engagement projects,
Which is very exciting.
Yeah.
I can talk about that at great length.
Yeah.
One of the most recent, very fulfilling examples for me is a project that we had with Kaimuki High School. Maybe I should just mention that we have, within the College of Social Sciences and Ethnic Studies, we have a number of very large programs. We have the Malama Inahupua program, we have the Palolo Pipeline program, which is an overall contribution to the Palolo community and from them to us, heightening education in the valley and general welfare. We have the No More House program working with homeless or houseless around the island, primarily at the Next Step shelter in Kaka'ako and the IHS, Institute for Human Services, Women's and Children's section. And then finally, we are developing a branch that we call Micronesian Connections, which is very concerned about relations between Micronesians and other ethnic groups. It's typically an ethnic studies start of a project. So those four. Aside from that, we have over the last 3 years worked under an overall grant that we call Kawa Mamua, Kawa Mahope, looking at learning from the past in some ways, learning from Hawaiian practices as they develop today. And teaching the sciences, which branches out in a number of other ways. Anyway, all of these came together during the Waves of Change conference that we had in April in Honolulu. We worked with Kaimuki High School kids that were trained in issues of climate change and rising waters, sinking islands, all that. Plus in media use. And at the conference, high school children in a program that's called IMUA, it's designated to students that are in danger of failing. Mostly Pacific Islanders in that program, unfortunately. They were working with a College of Ed professor and Willie and myself and another graduate assistant, Nelson Ikaika Fernandez from engineering, and many service learning students to film, interview the participants in this particular conference. And for me, the science component, the social sciences, support of teaching the natural sciences, the point of view where you use traditional knowledge, the Palolo, where the kids were from, the pipeline, the Malama Inahupua, the knowledge from the environment, and the issue of Micronesian connections. Where it all came together in one very fulfilling project. It was really exciting for me and transformative. And for the participants in the conference to have youth there, interested in what they were doing, participating in the lectures and asking them questions, they all thought of it as something very, very positive.
Yeah.
But the Micronesian component of it started a year earlier when we put up a forum modeled over the old ethnic studies model with community forums that were surprisingly well attended. We had not expected that. Where we were simply wanting to stress the positive connections between Micronesian and Hawaiian culture. So we used voyaging as a metaphor and as an actual link. We used Maupialak's saying, build upon a bridge, build upon a stick a bridge, to kind of inspire people to keep working on this. So at that conference, we're one of the captains that were trained by Maupialak, Bonica up here. And she's the one that is sailing the Kanehunamoku. And she was so inspired by this conference that her and Willie actually developed a program called Kahulawa'a, which I suspect he's going to talk about.
No, well, we'll see. Yeah, but
Okay. Otherwise, I'll tell you more
we will talk. We talked about a lot of stuff, but there's some segments that there wasn't time for, etc.
Yeah. Well,
But
for me personally,
yeah.
that kind of coming together of things that I know are connected, that I teach are connected, but coming together in the project is very fulfilling.
Yeah.
Worth
Right.
all the extra work.
Yeah. It's interesting, Lillie, you were talking about how you approached learning outside the classroom from a Hawaiian language perspective to know more about the culture and all that. But in fact, one could also do that kind of learning through civic engagement, not necessarily about Hawaiian matters or Hawaiian issues, which leads me to think, in a sense, that perhaps the Kanaka Maoli have something to teach us, all in terms of education, for instance. Could you say something more about that, perhaps?
Well, I think now there's such a push for culture-based learning, and it's something that is very Hawaiian. It's a practice that, the whole idea of being in a classroom and learning that way is very foreign. And so kind of circling back towards traditional practices of learning, I think civic engagement is very much, found in traditional styles of learning and teaching. And so you really get to, it's not just a traditional, you don't have to stick to just Native Hawaiian things. It's the style of, learning by doing, hands-on, that was, very much cultivated traditionally here in Hawaii. And I think is a lot of students are kind of getting back to that now, luckily through programs like what Ulla's doing. And so I think it just kind of makes learning a lot more dynamic. And you're not stuck kind of in this traditional standard box. And so, traditional styles of teaching and learning lend itself to all subjects, not just, Native Hawaiian and culture based.
Yeah, this is, to me, it's very interesting. It not only does change the paradigm for learning itself, but also redefines what learning is. Anything more on that, perhaps, like from your own experiences?
I think my experience kind of in the start of my higher education here at UH was definitely more research-based and kind of put more value on what you would learn in a classroom and kind of pushed aside the things that you might learn more in a civic engagement setting. And I think having it integrated into my undergraduate courses, and so much so in my graduate courses, it has kind of taught me that, or reminded me that there is a lot of value in civic engagement, and you learn quite a bit in those types of settings. And in my opinion, you learn a lot more than you would just in a classroom.
Yeah, good. Ulla, I want to go back to you and ask you about, because we talked about like civic engagement, we've been saying this, and service learning and you threatened to give us a definition of this. So before we go further, could you say that so we can like figure out what's really happening? And that's important in terms of pedagogy and so forth, things that you have talked about earlier.
Yeah, I think so. It's the definition is somewhat threatening to part of the establishment in higher education. So. But this is Thomas Ehrlich, the foremost thinker in this area, and his definition has been adopted by AACNU, the American Association of Colleges and Universities, that is very concerned about the future of America and has actually
Let me see that.
developed a study.
Okay, a crucible moment, college learning and democracy's future, a national call to action. And it's the National Task Force on Civic Learning and Democratic Engagement. Yeah, just to show people, you know, how it looks like. Color blue with white writing.
Okay, civic engagement.
Okay, thank you.
Civic engagement means working to make a difference in the civic life of our communities and developing the combination of knowledge, skills, values, and motivation to make that difference. It means promoting the quality of life in a community through both political and non-political processes. A morally and civically responsible individual recognizes himself or herself as a member of a larger social fabric and therefore considers social problems to be at least partly his or her own. Such an individual is willing to see the moral and civic dimensions of issues, to make and justify informed moral and civic judgment, and to take action when appropriate. Civic engagement encompasses actions wherein individuals participate in activities of personal and public concern that are both individually life enriching and socially beneficial to the community.
Yeah.
So service learning is just one of the many ways that you can do that. And service learning is basically just combining learning in the classroom with learning outside of the classroom.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, it's different from volunteerism, which is many people confuse the two. But if you're doing volunteerism, then you are doing something good for somebody else, not necessarily linked to academic learning. And that's a very big difference.
Yes. Because,
both make you feel good for yourself, but it's very different.
Yeah, because I picked up on a number of points here. And before I ask you, Lillie, about those kinds of, how did that, impact you, this kind of definition and the activities that you've done through that, whether, those activities relate to that definition or not. One of the things that I was thinking about here is that in terms of learning itself, when I mentioned like how learning gets to be redefined, rather than emphasis on the individual, it's emphasis on the collective and the relationship of the individual to the collective and those kinds of commitments and responsibilities and so forth that an individual might have to the community, that in the run-of-the-mill kind of paradigm of teaching, like professor and people talking, writing whatever he talked or she talked, rather than that, you have a different kind of approach. So I thought that really redefines what learning is and the relationship between the individual and the collective. So could you say more about this from your own experiences? I mean, by way of example, perhaps?
Well, I was really lucky to work with Professor Karen Umemoto. So she does a lot of the community planning courses in Department of Urban and Regional Planning. So one particular project that we did was with the Hawaiian Homestead community up in Kauai High, the Kailapa project. And I think that one thus far has been one of the most beneficial to me and is the source of quite a bit of my learning. And we talked quite a bit about planning, conceptual planning, and all of that in the classroom, and tried to prepare ourselves. And there are so many more elements that you kind of experience when you're up there that you can't necessarily, plan and prepare for in the classroom. And, you have to kind of think on your feet. And there's, this element of reciprocity between yourself and the community. So it's this particular project, they wanted to build community center, community resource center. And so we were going up to kind of just lay the foundation and speak to the community and try to represent their vision in a printed document plan. And so, it started from that framework and kind of grew into this huge project that continued into another semester. And it's everything from, you plan for these retreats and how to engage the community and, speak to them in a way that makes them want to speak to you, and try to ask them really heavy questions, and get them to ponder it and respond to you and try to record it in their voice. And that was kind of more into the nitty-gritty of the purpose of us going there. But it's also things like holding babies for moms while they're participating in these activities and helping make sandwiches for everybody and, staying in their homes. I mean, they literally opened up their homes to our entire class for a weekend. And so when you have that level of hospitality from a community, it demands more of what you produce for them. So you have, a commitment to them, and it's also very motivational. So when you're talking to real people in their home, holding their kids and grandkids, then you have a much deeper connection to them. And your project isn't just a school project. You have to look all of these folks in the eyes and make sure that you've represented them well.
Yeah, it's not like, here I am a researcher, I'm coming to the community, tell me what I need to do and then goodbye.
Exactly.
So it's very interesting. And even though you held the babies and made sandwiches, it wasn't the kind of voluntarism that Ulla was contrasting to real civic engagement kind of things. But that makes you feel part of the community, and that is really where the change comes in terms of being part of the collective.
Academically, we needed them for the experience and the practice in creating a conceptual plan for a community. That is something that we as students needed to experience in order to make our professional careers better and more successful. But then you also really understand that this is a community center for them, and you have to learn how to build their trust and engage with them, and they're entrusting you with the vision of a resource in their community. And so it's very much a give and take, but you're kind of there to prove yourself a little bit too. So just because we're supposed to be the experts, you still have to, work for it. And so, I mean, we got a lot of practice doing that.
That's good. That's good. And then, I wonder if there are real, quote unquote, experts when it comes to society and the social sciences, etc., or just like a process of, perpetual learning. We learn from them, they learn from us, we learn from one another, and so forth. So this actually then, just want to underscore, is not voluntarism. And the reason I want to underscore this, because a lot of people, they might look at civic engagement, service learning, this is a waste of time, they should be hitting the books, So they lose, track of all the importance and significance of this kind of learning. So could you say a little bit more, Ulla, about the question of voluntarism versus, there's, don't get me wrong, there's space and room for voluntarism, but that's not in terms of the learning that we're talking about here. Could you say a little bit more about that volunteerism versus what we are talking about? You know, maybe a few more examples and stuff.
I think it's essential what Lillie brought up. First and foremost, the community's role in helping students learn. I've seen it over and over again in Pelono, particularly with international or national guests, students coming here for a shorter period of time. It's really the children that are teaching the students. They are protecting them. They are making them feel good about themselves and making them believe that they can actually give that community something. So that is one example of stressing the value of the community. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, very good.
It's very, very important. We get as much back as we give.
Yeah.
The whole concept of giving back and being good is very complex, and I would like to see more political analysis of that.
Yeah.
You can probably buy a good consciousness from spending time serving food for homeless or giving them your old clothes. The kind of critical thinking and ethical analysis, the desire to learn much deeper that students come away from community engagement, civic engagement with, is extremely valuable. And I think that's one of the things that are going to point forward in education. And to my best analysis, we are in the middle of a paradigm shift. We see funders, we see accreditation in organizations. We can take a look at our own strategic plan for the university, the College of Social Sciences plans. There's a shift towards much closer community engagement, recognition of universities as part of the community and not above the community.
Yeah. And then you go sometimes, I mean, every year for the past few years, you go to national conferences about that, you present and stuff.
Yeah.
Could you say something about that kind of situation? I mean, along the lines that you were talking about, how this paradigm shift is happening, like nationally, you know.
Well, I of course, I go to conferences that deals with these issues. So most of us that come to those conferences, we already agree on it. That's a good idea. But generally, I see an awareness, and among some researchers and professors, a genuine desire to change the way we teach, the way we do research. And that's another component. Lillie brought up that graduate students can benefit from service learning, community engagement, civic engagement, and so can faculty. It's very, very helpful for us to work with students in the community to understand community issues.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, what Willie was talking about, like from his experience in Halau Kumana forward. And then this other segment that we're going to be looking at in a few seconds, he talks about the relationship that was created between, you know, the UH and Halau Kumana, or, you know, what needs to be done even more with that. And it's interesting that in this Hawaiian charter schools, they're way ahead in terms of the other schools, you know, high schools and so forth, in terms of, hands-on learning, so to speak. So let's go to Willie's, and then we can have more discussion generated.
Myself and Dr. Hasager were actually able to create a relationship with Halau Kumana. Not just the school in itself. We attempted on a couple of times to get students from the university to volunteer at the school. Students that may be interested in anything from education to any of the physical sciences. Those are kind of options that we provided for UH students. Along with that, we also provided the opportunity for UH students to get on board the canoe. Kanehunamoku, as I had mentioned before, is a double hull sailing canoe. It's a replica. It's a coastal sailing canoe, but it's a replica of a traditional canoe. And we had about 6 to 8 students, maybe more than that. We had about 10 students actually, from different places of the Pacific, of course Hawaii included, that got to participate in that service learning project. And what kind of our focus was for that was to bring these different communities of the Pacific into kind of one common place. And that common place was the canoe.
Yeah, so the canoe becomes space for learning, space for discovery in more ways than one, not just going from one place to another, but you discover about some of the things you were talking about the culture, etc. So it's culture-based, and brings Hawaii closer to the other spaces in the Pacific, like whether they are oceans or other islands and so on. In your, let's say, journey in terms of civic engagement and on the undergraduate level and graduate level, so what do you think of what like Willie is saying, and have you experienced some of those things, even though you didn't go on a canoe, at least in this kind of situation?
Yeah, definitely. I think that I've gotten a lot. Been able to enhance my kind of academic learning very much with civic engagement, and all of these different projects have kind of brought a more well-rounded learning experience, I think. So I mean, there's so much emphasis put on reading and researching and writing in the classroom, and so to be able to break it up and learn more social skills and learn more about actually what's happening in communities today, and how to engage with communities, especially, personally, I'd like to go into a profession where you're working a lot with communities. So you kind of have to be aware of what's happening, and not just go into it cold from just book learning and research and all of that. So it's important to learn all of those elements as well, I think.
Yeah. So Ulla, would you want to comment more? Like you mentioned something about the canoe, that only it's a recent development because of that kind of relationship between Halau Kumana and us guys, we the people in ethnic studies, right? So more on that, and then also later on I would like to ask you about, although you mentioned it, the relationship between ethnic studies and the Mānoa campus and the other campuses like KCC and others, perhaps.
Regarding the canoe, the project Kaholovā, it's one of those things that develop out of what's needed at the moment, but also the chance to have different people involved. I think if Willie hadn't been my graduate assistant at the time where we put up that forum, things might have gone in a different way, because he already had some of the experience and the connections. And that's one of the things with working with the community. You always have to be prepared to take the opportunity when it's there, and that things will be changing. You can't count of them always being the same.
Yeah. I'm looking now, sorry for the interruption, I'm looking now at some of the photos, about that, the Kaholovā project,
One of the very clear purposes of that was to build bridges across ethnic stereotyping and those kinds of things. And I think Noilani Gudja Kaupua in this book writes about the canoe as a place where you kind of go away out of the normal setting, and everybody becomes equal in a different way. So that wasn't something we were thinking about when we first started the project. It was Bonnie Carpia and Willie that really saw this opportunity to link youth from different ethnic groups, different cultural groups, and give them a chance to work together. We know you work together, you get to understand each other, and that's probably one of the strongest ways we have to overcome stereotyping and prejudice.
Right.
So.
I want to go to another segment from Willie because he touched upon what you touched upon regarding like relationship among groups, ethnic groups, nationalities, you know, whichever way you want to categorize them. And he talks about how these, at least Polynesian communities come together, or you know, Pacific communities come together, and learn from one another and see that, hey, there's power in that culture or in those cultures. Yeah, so it's a learning experience about ethnicity, race, and gender, and all that. Yeah, and in fact, Noelani talks about gender issues as well, even among Native Hawaiians, Native Americans, African Americans, the rest of it. She doesn't talk about those, but she talks about this gender thing and the importance of us being aware of it. But we go to Willie in terms of the relationship and learning about ethnicities and cooperation and knowing more about ourselves by looking at other peoples.
Really what we wanted to do is kind of bring together the Hawaiian community and actually the Micronesian community in Hawaii. While I was teaching at Halau Kumana, the students there had the opportunity to meet Papa Mau.
Could you say something more about Papa Mau?
Yeah, he was. He's kind of highly regarded as the one who is able to, I guess, reintroduce or help to revitalize traditional sailing and navigation to Hawaii. The catch was that he was actually from Micronesia, an island in Sarawak. What was kind of interesting about watching that interaction between Papa Mau and students of Halau Kumana, which are primarily Native Hawaiians, is I think students could really see how similar Papa Mau was to maybe their own kupuna, their grandparents, which I think did a lot to kind of break the stereotypes that were kind of prevalent in the school about the Micronesian community.
Yeah, and I might add something else, and I don't know, see how you react to it and more comments on that. In terms of question of identity, I mean, the individual identity becomes stronger in the person who is experiencing this one, and then they see the relationship in terms of identity to the group, whether it's like, you know, Kanaka or Iwi or any other group for that matter, and then how they differ and what kind of commonalities they might have with, say, you know, people from the Marshall Islands or somewhere else, you know. Yeah, so could you comment on what Willie was saying and from your experiences?
Well, I think for me, identity is a very interesting issue that you bring up, and it's something that I experienced in the project in Kauai High. It wasn't just a community center that we were building, it was a community center for a Native Hawaiian homestead group. And so being Native Hawaiian, you know, my identity, I was able to kind of have that level of connection with them and be able to, you know, being knowledgeable about Native Hawaiian protocols and stuff kind of lended itself to me being able to work with them. But, you know, I also worked with Ho'olu'aina, Kokua Kalihi Valley, and they have a very, very diverse group. And so even though, you know, I was able to connect with this Native Hawaiian community because of, you know, my identity and commonality being Native Hawaiian, I was also able to connect with the community at Ho'olu'aina that was so diverse. And you definitely are able to, you know, connect. We were able to connect with them over, you know, plants and we were able to connect with them over, the aina and other practices that way. And so, part of it is finding similarities, and part of it is, discovering the differences in your communities and in, how you identify yourself. And so, that element of, engaging with that particular community was very, very fun.
Yeah, well, like in ethnic studies, we say something like positive ethnic identity, like I'm proud of my ethnicity, my roots, and so forth. But I also see what the commonalities are with other groups, and I respect those groups, their cultures, etc. That would enrich, the whole society. So rather than have a negative ethnic identity, I am such and such an ethnicity, and the rest are no good. That's like. So Ulla, anything you want to bring up in terms of like now we're moving, in fact, into a different, a better way of dealing with civic engagement, etc., in terms of more resources and so forth. And by the way, congratulations on your becoming the associate specialist for civic engagement, which means like, this kind of university setting is giving more credence to this kind of learning paradigm.
Yeah, I see that as a very strong institutional support. It's the first time we have a director of civic engagement in Hawaii and in many other states in the US. It's supported in many different ways. For instance, there's a sustainability initiative, university system-wide, that has very strong civic engagement components. There's a growing acceptance of and understanding of the need to work with the surrounding community, of being accountable for what we're doing here, what are we spending the university money for, those kinds of things. But there's also a need to think on a global scale, a need to understand connections, a need for the social and natural sciences to work together. And one of the best ways to do that is through common projects. For instance, climate change. The natural sciences have been saying some of the things that many people consider new for years. Problem was that very few listened, and that had to do with not having the background and the skills to communicate the knowledge that they have, to not engage with that. And social sciences in that sense have a very important role.
Yeah, so it's a question of like, marrying the so-called hard sciences with the social sciences and humanities. We have 1 more minute to go, so any final thoughts, Lillie? We start with you.
Definitely civic engagement has been a big part of my academic career thus far, and has pushed me into a profession that kind of relies very much on civic engagement. And so, very grateful for all my experiences academically.
Great, yeah, thank you. Ulla, any final thoughts, like in 10, 15 seconds, 10 seconds?
It's a necessity for the future of democracy and a good human society, and maybe even survival.
Yeah, even a cooperative society, because we're moving towards either cooperative society or one man, each man or woman for himself and herself, which would be disastrous. Well, mahalo nui loa, thank you very much for helping us discuss those kinds of things. And to our viewers, we'll see you next time. Aloha.